Hello and welcome to what we can probably call the first official episode from this particular YouTube channel. If we want to count yesterday as the pilot, as it were, then let's get into the real meat and potatoes of things here. So, as I promised, we're going to be doing daily content, and why not start off with best foot forward, start with what you know, all those sort of cliches. I will start with what I know, or at least I have the most knowledge about. At least I hope I have the most knowledge about. In people's minds, and that is the team that I support, and that is your beloved Pittsburgh Steelers. Game 2 of the preseason gets underway tomorrow, 6:30 at Heinz Field. I am one of those people; it will always be Heinz Field to me, even though I'm not Yinzer officially. I'm honorary or inherited, whatever the word is. Yinzer, it's still going to be Heinz Field to me. Nothing's going to change about that. But 6:30 against the Buffalo Bills, and it seems as if this is going to be when they changed the preseason a couple of years ago to go from 4 games rather to 3 games. It sort of messed with the timeline a bit of what was going to be the game where most players would start. Like it always used to be the third preseason game that most of the starters would get the most minutes, so they can have the week off for preseason game 4 and then move on into the start of the regular season. But now with there being 3, and then there's the gap week between the end of the preseason for cut week and then start regular season. It kind of messes with things. Every coach has things in a very different manner, as everyone does. But it seems as if this is going to be at least the idea moving forward, that this is going to be the game where most teams play the most of their starters for the most amount of minutes. And we've seen that in the comments from both Mike Tomlin and Sean McDermott over the days that this is going to be the main one where the starters will get the most minutes. Mike Tomlin saying that the main players from last week, if we look particularly to the offense with Kenny Pickett at quarterback and George Pickens and all the stars as it were, that did play, because I know Cam Hayward and TJ Watt didn't play, but the main ones, they got one series and then they came out. He said he's going to give them more. Just how much more, you don't know. Sean McDermott saying that they're going to use the quarter and a half as a sort of baseline, and then take it from there. So I imagine it's going to be roughly the same. It might well end up being some of a game of chicken, as it were, who's going to pull their starters first, and then trying to work out, do we want to have first against second, seconds against first, who's going to try and coordinate it at the same time. It's going to be interesting to work that out, but it looks as if the majority of the snaps on both sides of the ball from the starts are going to come from tomorrow. So what I want to do in this video is basically discuss what I want to see the most from the Pittsburgh Steelers as they get ready for the second game against, again, what is a very, very good Bills team. Obviously, many people hyped them for Super Bowl glory last year, didn't make it. Still, if you look around, many people have them in that upper echelon of the AFC, along with Kansas City and Cincinnati. They may not be right in that category, but they are probably just about touching Cincinnati in the standings, as it were. Some might put them level. I personally would put them again just below, but some people might still be higher than maybe the emotional side of it. Thinking obviously with the Damar Hamlin stuff, if they're going to use that as fuel or motivation for this season, there's a whole lot of stuff. Revamped team, they are still a team that shouldn't be discarded straight away just because they've had so many failures in recent years. At least by when I say failure, I mean failures. They have been branded as Super Bowl contenders and then have struggled in the playoffs. So they are still a good team. And again, whilst we don't know exactly how much the first stringers are going to play, it is also going to be a very, very good test for the Pittsburgh Steelers to come up with. So, and by the way, I did say yesterday that we were going to have a few changes as we went along. First one is obviously the haircut, as you can tell. But the second one, something I quite like. Don't know why, it's just a little bit gimmicky, but I do quite like props. So what I've done is I've got a good old-fashioned coach's clipboard, and I've made a couple of notes of mind the ring light. Just a couple of notes of what basically I want to see from the Pittsburgh Steelers tomorrow in their second game. So first off, we will start with the most obvious one, and that is from Kenny Pickett. And I've got Kenny Pickett here, but you can pretty much put that down for the majority of the offensive starters, as it were. Be that George Pickens, be that Pat Frymouth, be that Isaac Sayamalu, who is probably going to be first string guard. moving forward. You can fiddle about with who you think the tackles are going to be and so on and so forth, but we know roughly who the starting offensive lines are going to be, tight ends, running backs, all that sort of stuff. But I've got here Kenny Pickett. I want to see him play for more than one quarter. Again, Mike Tomlin said that he's going to play them more than what they did last week against the Buccaneers. Just how much that's going to be, didn't really say. But again, it's one of those things you can play by ear. And if he's going to want to match what the Bills are doing, then maybe it will be a quarter and a half. And that's exactly what I want. I want a full quarter from Kenny Pickett. And whilst I know he has been the starter he's been established as the starter since going back to last season, I still think there is something about wanting to get as many reps in preseason as possible with every single bit of new material that you have to work with in a proper game environment. No, last year he did not have Calvin Austin, for instance. Last year he did not have this offensive line as it looks as if it's going to be. Whether or not you want to put Broderick Jones at left tackle, how that's going to work, how the snaps are going to work with Dan Moore Jr., for instance, all that sort of stuff. There are still little intricacies that this is not the same team as it was last year. So don't just assume that because he's they finally managed to get things in stride last year when he took over and everything was better towards the second half of the season. I still want him to get as many snaps as possible with this new team. Small tweaks though it may be, and again that goes along with the whole. The majority of with the offensive starts. I want to know exactly how George Pickens works with Allen Robinson, for say, at a wide receiver. How does Calvin Austin work alongside Deontay Johnson? All these little combinations of who we think the upper echelon of the, again, we'll just use this as an example, of the wide receivers. How do they work together? Let's try out, 4 receiver sets. Let's try 5 receiver sets, in which case you can put in like Miles Boykin. I've just made the list down here. Miles Boykin is probably on that thing. Would probably be 5th wide receiver if you want to have wide receiver, not have Pratt Freiermuth as a wide receiver, but actual wide receivers. I would probably put Miles Boykin, but Akeem Butler is in there. There's a whole raft of what do you want to do with Gunnar Olszewski? Do you want to keep him specifically as a return man and as those Matt Canada jet sweeps, or do you want to introduce him more into the offense? So I just want to try as many things as possible. That's what I would like to see. I don't want it to be 2 series and then out. I want as much as you can against a very good Buffalo defense. I just want to see what he can do with all these new pieces and give him as many reps as possible. If you want to limit him next week against the Atlanta Falcons, then by all means do it. But this week against the Buffalo Bills, in what many people think is the most important of the preseason games, that is what I want to see. Moving on to point number 2, and somewhat sticking with the quarterback. I don't know why, but I kind of want to see what Tanner Morgan can do. If we are to go along with the belief that Kenny Pickett is number 1, obviously, Mitch Trubisky will be number 2, and then it's really a fight between Mason Rudolph and Tanner Morgan for QB3. I genuinely want to see what Tanner Morgan has got. Now, I know that it's rare that QB3 actually does anything, but as we saw last year with the San Francisco 49ers, whilst it is very rare, occasionally you will have to do it. I know, the Ravens would have had to go, may have had to go 3 deep after Lamar Jackson and whatever happened, if anything happened to Tyler Huntley. In crucial moments, they would have had to go to the third QB for proper snaps. So I just want to see what Tanner Morgan has got. But because on Mason Rudolph, whilst you would think that his time had come and gone with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but the fact is they have still kept him around. Now, I was always of the belief that they were always grooming him to be Big Ben's replacement. Just because there were a couple of times, I want to say around 2017, 18, 19, I can't remember exactly when. It would have been later than that. It would have been, I believe, towards the end of Ben's career. So let's go with 2020, 2021-ish. There was a time where they just gave him a 1-year extension when his contract came up. And that was the thing that said to me, I remember saying it to a couple of friends at the time, they want him to be Big Ben's replacement. And just the amount of faith that they have shown him and the fact that they have consistently kept him around just showed that they still want him to do something. Now, obviously, being the franchise quarterback after Ben Roethlisberger has not come about. That's Kenny Pickett's job. But they have still kept him around. And, So why are they still doing it? Do they genuinely see him as a QB3? Are they keeping him just because because he knows the system well? He can help learn. But when it comes to actual quarterback 3 on the depth chart, there is just something to me like I want to see if Tanner Morgan can actually be better than Mason Rudolph. Just in case in that rare thing that we need him again. Hopefully you don't go to QB3. But again, just in case it does happen, what does Tanner Morgan offer? So whilst we get to, in around the mid third quarter, early fourth quarter, when the third and fourth string summer, I want Tanner Morgan to come in ahead of Mason Rudolph, just because I want to see what we have in him and whether or not he is going to be worth keeping. Because it may well be that Tanner Morgan decide, or maybe Tanner Morgan can outperform Mitch Trubisky and maybe be the backup. Maybe Mitch Trubisky, when quarterback injuries start to pick up, maybe some teams take a chance on him, everyone gets bumped up, maybe Tanner Morgan becomes the backup. I just want to see what we have. Whilst you can make the argument of wide receivers and tight ends, once you get to fourth and fifth strings or whatever, they aren't really going to make a difference. When it comes to quarterback, that's not really the case because they are the most important player on the team. So I just want to see what can Tanner Morgan, if anything, offer. Again, if he comes out and he's not that great, then by all means we'll be fine with Mason Rudolph. But I just want to know what the option is there. Okay. And then continuing on with depth, I kind of want to see once the first stringers go. I want Mike Thomas to go deep into the wide receiver depth group. Again, same sort of thing. Whilst we hope it doesn't get to fifth or sixth string wide receiver throughout the course of the season, you just want to know what happens. It may be that we trade someone away. Allen Robinson may have a good-ish season. Someone may say, "Oh, we'll take another chance on him." Send similar to Chase Claypool last year. Send a third-round draft pick or a second-round draft or whatever to the Steelers, and we'll take him on. Whether or not the Steelers want to, it would be highly controversial. But I honestly don't think rule out trade away Deontay Johnson because he's going to get paid soon, and the Steelers say no. After especially after what happened last season with 0 touchdowns, if he starts to decline, they say, "Can we get rid of him? We'll shove him off if someone wants to come in." I just think there is going to be some movement in the wide receiver room this upcoming season. So let's see what we have in terms of the depth. I really want to see what Miles Boykin can do because he only had 2 catches in the whole of last season. Now he played 16 games. If you look at what his stats were, he played 16 games for us. Only got 1 start, but only 2 catches on offense and 3 targets. So there is a player there because he did. I was a bit of a fan of him when he was before he came to the Steelers. So I think he can offer something. So I want to see what Miles Boykin can get. Akeem Butler as well. Same sort of thing. I want to see what they can offer. Cody White. Again, it's the same thing. You hope you don't need to go that far down, but in a position, in a position like the wide receiver, and where, again, as I've said, I think there's going to be some changes. I just want to see what the options are for the long term. And because we know the Steelers are very good at developing their wide receivers, you look at, Juju Smith-Schuster was not a first rounder. Deontay Johnson was not a first rounder. Antonio Brown, not a first rounder. We have this, I'm not going to say conveyor belt, but we at least have a history of taking players who may be seen undervalued at the wide receiver position and turning them into something. So let's just see what we have in possibility. Whilst many people may not care about the depth options, or when it gets to third and fourth string, that may be time for those at Heinz Field to start leaving. I personally at least want to stick around because I will be going to the game. I want to stick around and just see what we have and just see what they are in the flesh. Again, you can't really get a true sense of it because they will be going up against fellow third and fourth string defensive players from the Bills and so on. But I just genuinely want to see what they could do in a competitive NFL environment in stadiums, as Mike Tomlin likes to put it. Now we move on to the defensive side of the ball, and obviously the biggest talking point around the Steelers on the defensive side of the ball, arguably the whole team, because of the name factor and because of the talent as well, has been Joey Porter Jr. When you come in with a level of, I don't want to say expectation, but I think there is a level of expectation with Joey Porter just because of the name, but also because of how highly he was taken in the draft. you could argue because of how the numbers fell and Chicago didn't. Because the Dolphins forfeited their first round pick, and then I think it was the Dolphins. Don't quote me on that off the top of my head. I think it was the Dolphins. That was it. It was because they had the Tom Brady tapping up scandal. So when the Dolphins lost their pick, and then we traded Claypool to the Bears, and we got the second round, he was pick 32. So you can make the argument that he is still a first-round talent, even if he didn't have the first-round grade attached to him. So there is still a level of expectation, and he is going to be when you draft someone like that, he's going to be the main quarterback, the franchise cornerstone cornerback of the future. That is what you at least hoped to happen, at least to come from him. Now, he didn't play last week because of injury. Again, the expectation is he's going to get a lot more snaps this time around. And two things, I want him to play all through the first half. Again, go back to what Mike Thomas said and what Sean McDermott said. Again, you want to work out how they're going to play off against each other. Quarter and a half, roughly, I want to see him play all the way through that first half. And when he is playing, as much as possible, I want to see him go against Stephon Diggs. Because if you look at what's coming out of the Steelers training camp this summer, they are testing him as much as they can by giving him George Pickens to work with. Someone who is, George Pickens, the incredible raw talent that he is, and what he can do. You want him to have a good test. Now, though, really kick it up a notch in an environment that does matter in terms of performance, but doesn't matter in terms of results. Let's try and push him. Let's see what he has in his locker. So put him up against Stephon Diggs. I would like to argue every single snap. Stephon Diggs, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. It's a bit of a debate. Top 5, I think, is unquestioned. If you want to put maybe Justin Jefferson is in that discussion, Devontae Adams is in that discussion, Stephon Diggs is in that discussion, Jamar Chase is in that discussion. Whoever you want to put, I don't think you can really debate that Stephon Diggs is top 5. So if you want to really test Joey Porter Jr. in preseason, just to see exactly what he's made of and see what he can learn, see what tweaks can be made, put him up against a top wide receiver in a competitive environment and see what he can do. And then right, if he matches up well with Stephon Diggs, you've got a star in your hands. If he's okay, then there's some tweaks to go. And when the season comes around, you put him at cornerback 2 rather than cornerback 1, which you would assume would go to Patrick Peterson. But I just want to really push him. Let's just see what we have. Again, similar to in much of a ways of the depth conversation when it comes to wide receiver, I just want to get every little test that you can out of him from Joey Porter Jr. just to see what we've got. Again, he is probably going to be a project cornerback, but I genuinely think if he can come out of a matchup against Stephon Diggs with with a couple of pass deflections, with a couple of breakups, locking him down. If he can come away with, he doesn't have to do it on every play. I would expect Stephon Diggs to come away with a couple of receptions against him, just as how Roy is. But obviously, in a perfect world, he doesn't. But just really, really throw him into the deep end when it comes to NFL receivers. Just go with that. Then final point on the defensive side of the ball. Establish who the number 1 inside linebackers are. Because we have this hodgepodge of players. Now, again, various players have sort of emerged and there's been sort of ideas of what you want to get. But if you look at the list of inside linebackers that we've got, I feel like I should be talking like this, sort of with the hat, calling it a play. But I won't, just so I don't know how this is going to pick up. But we have Quan Alexander, Cole Holcomb, Elandon Roberts, Mark Robinson, Tanner Muse, and then those are the main guys I think will be competing for the number 1 inside linebackers jobs. And then you've got Kwiatkowski and Ryan, whose names I thought I would remember, but I don't right now. But they are sort of further down the line. But I want to really establish who the number 1 inside linebackers are. Because if you look to the defense last year, that was very much a weak point. Once you had TJ Watt go down, and teams knew they couldn't rush. They had someone who can, even though he's an outside linebacker, can disrupt the run game as well as get after the quarterback. It became so easy on occasions to run on the Pittsburgh Steelers because we didn't have that proper, we had a bunch of options. Robert Spillane was there, Devin Bush was there, Marshak was there, all gone. So we have this fresh crop of talent, and there's been various battles and stuff in training camp. Who's going to be the number one? I just want to be able to come out of Acrisure Stadium tomorrow night and have a clear indication of who the number one inside linebackers is going to be. I think what you can maybe give them a further tweak next week against the Falcons. I think, again, with this game being the main number one starter game where you want the majority of stars to play, this is where I want the number ones to be established. And for me to come out and say, right, I know it's going to be, defensive line is going to be on the edge, Highsmith and Watt, Cam Hayward and Ogunjobi inside. And then middle linebackers, they are, for the sake of argument, Quan Alexander and, let's just pick one, Cole Hogue. I want to know that these are my two inside linebackers. And then once they get reps and once they get used to each other, on the practice field, and again next week against Atlanta, you would assume whoever the number one pairing would again start that game as well. But once we have that established, I think a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers fans would be feeling a lot more confident knowing that we have these two options solidified down in the middle of the field, and hopefully, especially with the introduction of Quan Alexander, who I think should be the number one, various sub-packs and whatever, Quan Alexander should be number one on the depth chart when it comes to inside linebackers. So that is what I just want to see, is to know who our inside linebacker is going to be, and then hopefully they put in good performance and they give us a lot of faith moving into the season. So that is what I want to see from the Pittsburgh Steelers in the preseason game. Now, how things are going to work out, again, with it being preseason, it's going to be hard to tell. For all we know, there could be an injury on the first drive that makes the coaches think nobody's going to take everyone out, not taking any more risks. Kenny Pickett might throw a couple of interceptions, and Donovan might think, no, let's get him out. It's going to be very fluid, but you have a rough idea of what it's going to be. So that's what I wanted to see, and then hopefully it is just a game where, again, as I said earlier, performance matters more than result. Again, I can take a loss to the Bills in preseason, but if you want to use it as a measuring stick, and again, it won't be first teams against first teams all the way through as it wouldn't be in the regular season, but just a more competitive game than we were than against the Bills last season, when Kenny Pickett was, again, very much thrown at the deep end when it came to, because it was in one of his first few games. I can't remember the schedule off the top of my head, but he came in against the Jets. Then there was the Eagles and the Bills, very close together. I can't remember which one it was his exact first real test. I can't remember which order it came in. I think it was the Bills, because I think it was the Eagles was before the bye week. But even so, it was not a very good day for Kenny Pickett up in Orchard Park. So I just want to see a more competitive game. Just so we can say, right, we have made these steps forward. Because I do think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be, I don't think they're going to win the AFC North. I think that is the Bengals. But I do think we can clinch a wild card spot. And depending on how the divisions work out and the rest of the standings, it is very possible that we could face the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs. So I just want to know, when push comes to shove, can we at least be more competitive against the Bills when the time is going to matter? Now, most of that, of course, will come from the first quarter and a half if we can keep it tight. After the second, third strings come in, it's sort of all up in the air. But just some level of competitiveness against a very good team, and then give us a little bit more faith moving into the season, and know, right, if we can hang with the Bills for as long as we can, then that means we have taken that step forward I think most fans have expected us to take this year. And then, who knows, I don't think we're going to be competing for a Super Bowl, but if we can at least win a playoff round, I think that's what most fans would want and probably expect, at least after the developments that we've made from last season to this season. So that is what I want to see. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that nonsense. So I will be back on Monday with a brief recap of what has happened around the NFL in preseason week 2, seeing what the storylines are. Again, this will be the weekend where judging by a lot of the tone, there will be a lot more named starters playing. So let's see what various combinations and what teams have put out and which players are starting to emerge, which players are looking bad. All that sort of stuff. We'll give a bit of a recap on Monday. So until then, you guys take care. Toodles.